Excellent, Lara. Thank you very, very much. Really an honor to join all of you today. Hopefully my mic and sound comes in clear, and just give me the thumbs up or the thumbs down if we're doing okay. So good afternoon to each and every one of you today that's been able to join us from far and wide, and mostly in Saskatchewan, I presume. But again, my name is Guy Lonechild. I'm proud to be the president and CEO of First Nations Power Authority, an organization which I helped to start along with SaskPower and the government of Saskatchewan back in 2009, 2010, when we were talking about ways that we need to include Indigenous peoples in the economy, in the provincial economy. And so this resulted in a collaborative event where we would enter into a memorandum of understanding and then subsequently a master power agreement that would look at how Indigenous communities would build capacity, build renewable energy projects in the province through SaskPower's offering clean and safe and reliable renewable energy generation to SaskPower's grid. So we've been around since 2011. And I'm here with you today to talk to you a little bit about what some of our thoughts and ideas are around what future supply could look like with Indigenous participation. I might add that renewable energy generation presents a significant opportunity for reconciliation with Canada's Indigenous peoples, or Indigenous people in Canada more succinctly. That includes First Nations, Métis, and Inuit. We are an organization that prides itself in building capacity, transferring knowledge, and building Indigenous IPP capacity. That's independent power producer capacity. Why is that important? Well, for too long, I think Indigenous communities have been left out of the development agenda. And today there are increasing concerns and calls around the need to clean up our electricity grid in Canada, green the electricity grid, and find ways and avenues for Indigenous participation in new and innovative ways. And so I think moving forward, I think what we hope to present is approximately 650 megawatts of new power generation to be pursued and developed, build, own, operate, and maintain renewable energy assets in the province. And so as you have witnessed lately, SaskPower has ramped up its efforts to bring new renewable energy generation online. We find that that's a very exciting prospect for many Indigenous communities to participate in ownership opportunities. And so what you will see through SaskPower and FNPA's program offerings is increased equity participation in wind and in solar projects. As a matter of fact, I think SaskPower is bringing on significant new wind projects online. Up until 2026, we'll see an increase of around 300 or 400% of increased capacity in wind. And of course, in the solar power generation, looking at larger scale solar projects, I think what you're going to see through our program offerings is the scaling of approximately 100 megawatt projects for the market. And what guides, I think, FNPA in terms of its relationship? Let me just go there in terms of sort of articulating where FNPA comes in. We actually do the review and the evaluation of specific projects that First Nations would enter into a competition. We're proud to say that we'll be making some announcements, hopefully in the very near future, regarding additional rollouts and offerings of renewable energy in the province. And so through a First Nations Opportunity Agreement, First Nations would be able to identify what types of equity participation levels they bring to the table, what kind of federal government funding support would be good to provide a very cost competitive LCOE, or levelized cost of electricity, and additional economic benefits and impacts to the province. And so we find that that is something that that is our forte in terms of developing sort of parameters, criteria around economic participation by Indigenous communities. knowledge transfer, skill development, and actually building and participating in the construction jobs and careers that we see through renewable energy generation. We also see an increased need and demand for corporate players in many parts of Canada, and of course Saskatchewan is not any different. Everyone and all are looking for ways to lower their emissions profile and develop corporate partnerships. And so what I think we can expect to see in Saskatchewan is corporate partnerships with First Nations and Métis communities being forwarded in the province, or being forwarded to SaskPower and others in the province for development as well. You're also going to see beyond 2026, I would say, 2027 or even 2030, you're going to see I think a revisitation of projects that have been contemplated in the past by SaskPower where there was significant Indigenous participation. And I want to talk about hydro development a little bit, smaller scale and medium scale hydro development. And so some of those opportunities, of course, in the space of hydro, we do require additional base load opportunities. I think you might be looking at one day seeing a revisitation of projects where there would be significant equity participation, federal government support, and a whole host of economic impacts to the province, building baseload power options. And as you know, or may not be aware, FNPA was asked by SaskPower back in 2018 to conduct Indigenous engagement around the conversation around small modular reactor development and micro modular reactor development. And so we've been quick to establish a national table of Indigenous people and representatives and leaders discussing what opportunities may exist in the adoption of nuclear technologies in Saskatchewan, both Generation 3 and Generation 4 technologies, and some of their project attributes they bring to the decarbonization opportunity in Saskatchewan. And so I'm excited to see what the opportunity presents in terms of equity participation for larger scale infrastructure and major projects in the country, which will also help to contribute to economic and environmental reconciliation with Canada's Indigenous peoples. And maybe just in conclusion to the prospects for reconciliation to happen, we are in very important conversations with the government of Saskatchewan and SaskPower in what does the future pathway look like for new energy efficiency programs. How do we participate in a meaningful way with demand-side management programs, both with SaskPower and with Sask Energy, of course, two Crown corporations. We are very interested in how energy literacy and building capacity in First Nations communities could be supported moving forward. And so there are just an extremely large amount of benefits, both tangible and intangible, that we could realize when we increase energy literacy programs and, of course, bolstering our human resource efforts to get Indigenous people into the power sector. And so maybe I'll just stop there and maybe hand it back to you for any questions you might have.
I was going to say, wonderful. You covered quite a bit of ground there. So just for those of us watching, for those of you watching right now, yeah, feel free to toggle over to the Q&A function. And I have a question for you already and a couple more. Does FNPA have a favorite renewable, or is it focused on an equal disbursement of wind, solar, geothermal is the question.
Right. I would say that our members, our Indigenous members and our industry members sort of dictate what is the technology of choice. And some different technologies come with different risk profiles in terms of development. I know that we've cut our teeth a little bit on 20 megawatts of additional solar generation that is now feeding the power grid in Saskatchewan. Those seem to be the projects that entail the least time horizon development two years or 2.5 to 3 years sometimes for development and before reaching commercial operation. And so I find those are significant learning opportunities in terms of the technologies that come forward. We're now installing bifacial panels that actually collect sunlight from sun bouncing off the snow underneath of the solar installation. And there's a whole host of other technologies that are just making solar panels that much more better, increasing capacity. And so that's for me, I think, one of the most important sources of clean renewable energy that doesn't require a 5 to 7 year development time horizon. But certainly it isn't the panacea of meeting some of our supply requirements in the province, which includes baseload power generation. And I would say geothermal is one that's an interesting prospect, and I've spent some time learning from that project in Southeast Saskatchewan. I'm hopeful that there will be additional sources of wind that First Nations will be interested in. But largely, I say that they're all needed, they're all required, and the energy mix that we would pursue, all of it's important.
So maybe switching gears here, we're seeing increased expectations on engagement, on consultation, formal duty, as well as just regulatory processes. And when I think about this guy, it doesn't necessarily lend itself well to moving quickly to hit that
Right.
net zero or that massive one. So I'm just curious, like, what's your perspective on this?
Yeah, well, I think it's a challenge that the entire country and Canadian electricity utilities are struggling with today, is the introduction of the clean electricity standards and the regulations that we have to try to meet some of the goals of reducing emissions from fossil fuel power generation, both coal and natural gas, present some significant opportunities and challenges for the province of Saskatchewan particularly. So I would say we can play a very important role in helping to decarbonize our power generation assets. But the time is now, and it's actually yesterday. We have to do more wind and solar. We have to also pursue new technologies like geothermal and small modular reactor development that enable more renewables to come on stream. And the other aspects of major project considerations under the Impact Assessment Agency of Canada is another interesting opportunity. And I always say there's opportunity in new regulations or regulations that require meaningful Indigenous engagement. And so what does that look like? It means that companies like SaskPower are now required to come up with reconciliation action plans. And that's the new industry standard today. How is it that economic development is going to be built with including Indigenous people and their communities and their development corporations? And so those are the opportunities that it's a good time for FNPA. It's a good time for First Nations to actually be part of the conversation, because new regulations actually can mean that there's more inclusion of those who have traditionally been left out of the development agenda around power generation, transmission, distribution, and all sorts of opportunities. So again, I just think that just a quick study of all of the regulatory regimes that come into play. We're not going to like it all, what comes from the federal government, but then again, there are opportunities for investment and economic development in the province.
Oh, thank you. We have a question here, and perhaps I may be misreading it, but maybe this was when you noted that there were 650 megawatts that FNPA is looking to carve off and take going forward. So do future energy projects need to be assessed and pre-approved by FNPA, similar to SaskPower, is the question.
Yeah, there's information sharing going on right now between SaskPower and FNPA in terms of our due diligence processes, our evaluation of specific proposals that would come our way. And we're trying to perfect what's a new Indigenous procurement standard. And that new Indigenous procurement standard would build on best practices that we've seen SaskPower pursue in terms of the procurement through FNPA and its own RFP processes. But we're also looking to opportunities to learn from Hydro One's new offering, where anything over $100 million of transmission assets, 50% will be owned by First Nations in that province. And so we do have to find ways and avenues to ensure that everything pencils out. And we take quite an in-depth look at the financial model. We take a look at have all the project risks been addressed, and if not, how do we assist in helping to reduce that risk? And we do that very willingly, because we want to see projects succeed and be advanced on for consideration.
Oh, thank you. Another question we have from the audience is, are FNPA members looking at hybrid? And so they gave an example of solar plus storage or wind plus storage facilities, or even just standalone storage projects as the need for energy when we need it becomes more pressing.
Right. That's called the trifecta: the wind, the solar, and the battery storage. And certainly we've been getting information from some of our industry members around projects that do exist to that in south of the border in the United States. And so we've also been looking at virtual net metering as an opportunity for Saskatchewan First Nations, and even one day, hopefully, rural municipalities, and partnerships between RMs and First Nations might make sense. And so if there is wind, battery, and solar development that includes all three, we'd take a look at it. I think Saskatchewan is positioning itself well to take a look at those three options as a sort of a collaboration between the three. And I know that First Nations, again, are suffering with high power bills. We're trying to find ways that will not only just build energy literacy, but also development capacity, so that they can develop these projects that will, hopefully one day help to benefit and, add some much needed financial resources and opportunities to northern communities. So we're finding innovative ways to locate projects in southern Saskatchewan where it makes sense.
Guy, you noted that some Indigenous communities have high power bills. Can you maybe explain a little bit what that is? Is there a different power rate for Indigenous communities?
Well, the interesting thing is that the power rates are the same. There was a need to take a look at resort rates versus the regular rates that SaskPower was charging to its customers. I think that's now been rectified. And I think we need to understand that power delivery through northern communities that don't have natural gas or access to natural gas for space heating rely on electricity and SaskPower for their heating as well. And so when we have overcrowded homes, substandard building construction, we need to find new ways of not just being energy efficient, but moving forward to be bold enough to think about net zero building standards, and how do we find a way forward for communities to rely on other potential technologies that make sense. And so we're looking at cold climate microgrids in terms of being grid connected. We're looking at opportunities for power reliability for both Indigenous communities and Canadian businesses that do business and do require backup generation. So I would say that power bills are probably still the number one issue that we're hearing from Indigenous communities, and so that challenges us and SaskPower to find innovative ways to build projects that would help to alleviate some of that financial burden. And when we increase our energy literacy, where the power comes from, the cost of delivery of power, that can only help to smooth out and better reputations in the province, not just for SaskPower, but for all of us in the industry as a whole.
Oh, thank you for that, and a little bit of background. I appreciate that. You mentioned with the opportunities, right, that you're seeing with some of the new regulations for instance, what's in the Impact Assessment Agency of Canada. And this is where reconciliation action plans are now on proponents, or they're
Right.
now on the organizations like SaskPower. Have you seen anybody across Canada or in other jurisdictions that you're looking at? Is anybody getting this right? Or is anybody that we should be looking to say model this way? Or
I'm so glad you asked that question. I've got a good friend of mine. He's the Chief Executive Officer of the Ontario Power Generation. Mr. Ken Hardwick will be joining us June 26th and 27th in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, talking about exactly that, how the $1 billion spend as a target for Indigenous businesses in that province will assist in moving economic reconciliation down the road to where it's meaningful and providing increased capacity, training, certification to allow Indigenous companies and contractors to benefit from a lot of the activity around not just power generation, but small modular reactor development. We know that Darlington New Nuclear Project is coming on stream. So there's a whole lot of things that we can glean from the OPG. And as you know, they are greatly assisting SaskPower in its pursuit of SMRs. And we look to do just that, is to increase N certification, hopefully in all 6 different categories of N stamps. And we will ensure that First Nations are in the province have an opportunity to learn from the best. And we are a non-nuclear generation jurisdiction. So look for more best practices around Indigenous engagement and the actual implementation of concrete reconciliation action plans from OPG.
Oh, we'll keep an eye on that. I have another question for you from our audience. Is FNPA also looking at expanding into extraction of natural resources, such as rare earth mining or lithium from brine for production of storage facilities?
Well, we are not currently in that space.
Okay.
But I think more and more, I think we have to turn our attention to what are the advantages of FNPA playing a meaningful role in Indigenous engagement. That's something that I think that we can help to fast track and hopefully provide opportunities for information sharing with Indigenous communities on those opportunities.
Okay. Another question from your kind of experience: how feasible are solar farms to build and operate? And this individual is saying, I've learned that without certain level of provincial and federal funding, it may not be economically feasible to build. What's your perspective on this?
Well, I would say that federal funding support certainly helps. Any type of provincial incentives will certainly help. And I think what we're striving for is win-win-win situations all around. We're looking for sort of a very cost competitive project that would help to provide price certainty, or at least mitigate price increases moving forward into the province. And so wind and solar, and those, like solar specifically, is a technology that can provide some of that as a solution. And federal government funding to support through the, like, say, the SREPS program, the strategic smart renewables electricity pathway program that's been introduced by the feds, helps to provide much needed equity participation for First Nations and mainstream projects to be developed. And so if we're going to be introducing clean electricity regulations, Lara, the next answer has to be, what about federal and provincial incentives? And so that has to go hand in hand, and we see that as an opportunity for growth of the province.
Thank you. You mentioned, and maybe I'll circle back, that FNPA did do some engagement with communities on different power topics, and one of them was nuclear. I'm forgetting the other ones now, but just maybe even more broadly, like, what are you hearing from your members and from the community members?
Yeah, I would say that from our Indigenous members specifically, they are in pursuit of energy sovereignty, just like how renewable energy and increased infrastructure around upgrading the grid, modernizing the grid, those are opportunities for all communities, Indigenous and non-Indigenous in the province. And so if there's opportunities to implement AMIs and smart metering and develop smarter grid systems, I think that presents a whole host of opportunities for not just SaskPower, but the entire province and communities. And so for us, I would say that there's a brighter future ahead when you know that your lights are going to come on and that they're more in control of their energy destiny than ever before. And so I see a lot of good things that could happen in community solar projects moving forward in the province.
So if we were to have this conversation, UI and the folks maybe watching our call right now, but it's 10 years from now, what would look different?
I would say that you should expect that Indigenous communities will have ownership of both small, medium size, and larger scale power projects in the province and actually in the country as well. You'll see an increased awareness and interest in power sector jobs, the energy transition that's happening in Canada right now. There was 125,000 jobs, I think, that have been lost just due to the oil and gas sector energy transition that's happening. But there are a significant amount of clean energy jobs that are being generated. And so in 10 years from now, I think you're going to see a lot more people hopefully working at SaskPower too. And this is, I think, an important goal that a Crown corporation must look at and pursue quite aggressively. As for FNPA itself, we looked at expanding our learnings in Saskatchewan to provinces like British Columbia and Ontario. And I've recently joined the Clean Energy BC Board of Directors, talked with ministers of that government in that province, and are working quite meaningfully with the Ontario government and OPG. So this little idea of FNPA in Saskatchewan is actually growing quite rapidly in its presence and its opportunities as well.
As you're chatting, we have about 1 minute left for anybody who has a question here, but as you're chatting across Canada, what are they wondering about us, or what are you noticing that's different in the conversations?
I would say what the main question was, what can they learn from the Saskatchewan experience? Mm-hmm. And I think just based on Saskatchewan First Nations' proud history of developing institutions, like the First Nations University of Canada, like Saskatchewan Indian Institute of Technologies, and of course FNPA, it's about Indigenous-led. I feel like that's a very powerful statement that requires a lot of thought in terms of how that's going to be undertaken. And so we all win in the country when First Nations are a part of the energy conversation and actually have a stake in these projects in an ownership position and are taking risks. They are the ones who are laying out capital for these projects to be built. So that's a real opportunity in itself. So quite proud of the journey we've been on.
Yeah, for anybody in our audience who wants to learn more about FNPA, where should they go, Guy?
www.fnpa. I shouldn't say www. I think I just aged myself. fnpa.ca. How does that sound?
Perfect. And if it helps, I was nodding along with WW. So there you go. We're both in that boat.
Yeah.
Hey, thank you so much, Guy, for joining us today. Thank you to our audience for your questions and for your interest in this topic. We'll wrap it up. It's 1:26, so you can move on to your next session. Enjoy the rest of today's events. Thanks again, Guy.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks.